The conference room at the Galactic Council headquarters had never been so quiet. Hundreds of alien diplomats from dozens of different worlds sat in their seats, staring at the holographic displays floating above the central platform. The images showed something that should not have been possible. Ambassador Telrock stood at the podium, his three-fingered hands gripping the edges as he addressed the assembly. He was a Vryn, a species known for their calm and logical thinking, but today his voice carried an edge of something the council rarely heard from him: fear. "They are gone," he said simply. "The humans have left." The silence broke. Voices erupted from every corner of the massive chamber. Some aliens clicked their mandibles in disbelief. Others flashed colors of confusion across their skin. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Counselor Vashna rose from her seat. She was a crystalline, her body made of living mineral that reflected light in rainbow patterns. Her people had been trading with humans for over 200 years. "This cannot be accurate. No species can evacuate completely. There must be some who stayed behind." Telrock shook his head. "Our scouts have checked every known human settlement. Every colony. Every space station. Every outpost. They are all empty. Not abandoned in chaos, but methodically cleared. The humans took everything with them. What they could not carry, they destroyed." The holographic displays changed, showing image after image of vacant human cities. Buildings stood intact but lifeless. Spaceports sat empty. Agricultural domes continued to function on automatic systems, growing food for no one. It was like walking through a ghost civilization. "How many?" Someone called out from the back of the chamber. 200 billion individuals, Telrock replied. "Gone in less than one standard week." The number hit the council like a physical blow. Moving that many people was a logistical nightmare. It would require thousands of ships, perfect coordination, and absolute secrecy. Yet somehow, the humans had done exactly that. Admiral Corvin of the Vexian Empire stood up. He was a tall being, heavily muscled, with scales that gleamed under the chamber lights. His people were warriors, and they had always viewed humanity with suspicion. "Good riddance," he said loudly. The humans were becoming too bold, too aggressive. This resolution we passed was necessary to contain them. If they wish to retreat to their home systems, let them hide there. Several council members voiced agreement, but others looked uncertain. A younger voice spoke up. Junior Analyst Pimra was a Saukoth, a small amphibious species that rarely spoke in full council sessions. Her position was minor, mostly involving data analysis and reports that few people read. But now she raised one webbed hand hesitantly. "Honored Council, may I present my findings?" Telrock looked surprised but nodded. "Proceed." Pimra activated her own holographic display. It showed a map of the entire galactic sector, with human settlements marked in blue and major trade routes in green. "I have been studying the locations of human colonies over the past 50 years. At first, their expansion seemed random, following resources and habitable worlds. But when you overlay their positions with galactic infrastructure, a pattern emerges." The display shifted. Suddenly, the seemingly random scatter of blue dots formed a clear strategic network. Every major trade route had human outposts nearby. Every military choke point had human listening stations. Every resource-rich system had human survey teams. "They were not just exploring," Pimra said quietly. "They were positioning themselves? And now they have withdrawn to a defensive perimeter that controls access to critical areas of space. 17 resource zones are now behind their lines. 3 major trade corridors pass through space they can easily monitor or blockade." The chamber went silent again. But this time the silence felt different. Heavier. Counselor Vashna's crystalline body flickered with dark colors. "Are you suggesting this was planned? That they knew we would pass the resolution?" Pimra pulled up another data stream. The resolution was proposed by 12 different species over the past cycle. I have reviewed the records. All 12 species had one thing in common. In the years before proposing the resolution, each one declined human offers for mutual defense treaties or economic partnerships. The implication hung in the air like smoke. The humans had offered friendship. When that friendship was rejected, they had begun preparing for something else. Captain Dren of the Morvac clan slammed his fist on his desk. The Morvac were warriors who respected strength above all else. "This is not a retreat," he said flatly. "My people have studied human military history. We have analyzed every war they fought on their homeworld before they reached the stars. This pattern is familiar. When humans evacuate civilians from a war zone, it means they are preparing for total conflict. They are clearing the board." "Ridiculous," Admiral Corvin scoffed. "They are one species. We are dozens. They have abandoned their forward positions. What threat could they possibly pose?" Before anyone could answer, alerts began chiming throughout the chamber. A message was arriving at Council communication systems. It bore human encryption codes, but they were old codes that Council intelligence had broken years ago. Almost as if the humans wanted the message to be read, Tell R.O.K. opened the message and read it aloud, his voice growing quieter with each word. "To the Galactic Council, humanity withdraws from all treaties and agreements. All debts are void. All obligations ended. We came seeking partnership and found suspicion. We offered friendship and received restriction. We will not forget this. The galaxy is vast, but memory is longer. No farewell is given because none is deserved. No warning is offered because none will be heeded. What happens next is your own choice." Signed, Director Marcus Reed, Human Strategic Coordination Office, Human Strategic Coordination Office. Vashna repeated, "Our intelligence services have no record of such an agency." That fact alone sent chills through many in the chamber. If the humans had maintained a strategic coordination body that Council intelligence never detected, what else had they hidden? The meeting dissolved into arguments. Some dismissed the human withdrawal as cowardice. Others, like Captain Dren and Analyst Pimra, urged caution and investigation. But in the chaos, no one paid attention to a small detail buried in Pimra's data. She noticed it hours later, alone in her office, reviewing scanner logs from human ship departures. Every vessel had been traveling at speeds that should have been impossible. The energy signatures suggested drive systems operating beyond known theoretical limits. The humans had not just left. They had left using technology they had never revealed to the Council. Pimra sat back in her chair, her skin turning pale blue with worry. Somewhere out there, beyond Council space, 200 billion humans were preparing something. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The exodus was complete. The silence had fallen. And in that silence, something was building that would shake every civilization to its core. The merchant vessel Wandering Prophet drifted through the outer edges of the Keller system. Its cargo holds full of textiles and processed metals. Captain Renna sat in her command chair, reviewing trade manifests with the tired eyes of someone who had been making the same run for 15 years. She was Dalthine, a species known for their business sense and political neutrality. Her ship flew under an independent charter, which meant she traded with anyone who had credits to spend. Her communications officer, a young Vryn named Talus, looked up from his station. "Captain, I am picking up a strange signal." "Strange how?" Renna asked without looking up from her datapad. "It is human," Talus said, confusion in his voice. "But there should be no humans in this sector." "They all left weeks ago?" That got Renna's attention. She set down the pad and moved to the communications station. "Play it." A voice came through the speakers, speaking in clear galactic common. "Unidentified vessel, this is the human ship Defiant Memory. We mean you no harm. We request permission to approach for communication." Renna felt her skin prickle with uncertainty. The Galactic Council had been searching for any remaining humans since the Exodus. Finding one here in neutral space far from any major trade routes was unexpected. Talus scanned them. The sensor display lit up with data. The human ship was small, roughly the size of a frigate, with energy signatures that seemed strangely muted. It was clearly trying to remain undetected by anyone except ships at close range. "They are powering weapons," Talus warned. Defensive stance only, Rena observed. They are not targeting us. Open a channel. She waited for Talus to nod, then spoke clearly. Human vessel, this is Captain Rena of the Wandering Prophet. We are a neutral merchant ship. State your business. The response came quickly. Captain Rena, we have been monitoring your career for some time. Your reputation for discretion and fair dealing is well known. We wish to propose a business arrangement. Rena shared a look with Talus. This was highly irregular. I am listening. Not over open channels? Will you accept a delegation aboard your ship? 2I. Individuals, unarmed, for 1 hour of your time? Every instinct told Rena to refuse. Getting involved with humans right now, when tensions with the Council were so high, could destroy her business. But curiosity was a powerful thing, and humans had always paid well for services rendered. You may send your delegation, but my security will be present, and any sign of threat will result in immediate ejection from my vessel. Understood and agreed. 20 minutes later, Rena stood in her ship's small conference room, flanked by 2 armed Dalthine guards. The door opened and 2 humans entered. One was a woman with gray hair and steady eyes, wearing a simple flight suit. The other was a younger man carrying a sealed case. The woman extended her hand in the human greeting gesture. Captain Rena, I am Elizabeth Warren, formerly a human diplomatic courier. This is James Torres, a civilian analyst. Thank you for seeing us. Rena did not take the offered hand. Her species did not touch strangers. You have 1 hour. Explain what you want. Elizabeth sat down without invitation, a boldness that was typical of humans. We want to hire you to deliver messages. Messages to whom? To species who were friendly to humanity before the Exodus, the Nalthine Collective, the Free Miners of Orthos Belt, the Telvic Assembly, a dozen others. Rena's eyes narrowed. What kind of messages? James opened his case and pulled out several sealed data chips. Encrypted communications. You would deliver them without knowing their contents. We would pay you 50,000 credits per delivery. It was an enormous sum for such simple work, which meant it was probably very dangerous work. And if the Council stops me? If they search my ship and find messages from humans? Elizabeth leaned forward. The Council is already searching ships, but they are looking for military intelligence, weapons, or refugees. Simple data chips in a merchant vessel's cargo will not raise alarms, especially if they are encrypted with commercial codes. You deal in information trade sometimes, correct? This would appear to be ordinary business. She was right. Rena had carried encrypted corporate communications before. It was a common side business for independent merchants. Why should I help humanity? The Council has made their position clear. Because the Council is making a mistake, Elizabeth said quietly. And when they realize it, there will be a scramble to re-establish contact with us. The species who maintained back channels, who kept lines of communication open, will be the ones who prosper in what comes next. You would be positioning yourself advantageously. Rena considered this. Humans were known for thinking several moves ahead. What comes next? What are your people planning? Elizabeth smiled, but it was not a warm expression. We are planning to survive. And to remember who our friends were. The implication was clear. There would be consequences for the Council's actions, and those consequences would distinguish between enemies and neutral parties who had maintained contact. Rena made her decision. I will deliver your messages. But I want payment in advance, and I want assurances that these messages contain nothing that will bring military action down on my ship. Agreed. James pulled out a credit chip and slid it across the table. This contains payment for the first 3 deliveries. The messages contain nothing but communication between civilians. We simply want to tell certain parties that humanity has not forgotten them. Over the next hour, they worked out the details. Drop points, encrypted response protocols, emergency contact procedures. By the time the 2 humans left, Rena had committed herself to a course that could either make her wealthy or destroy her career. The human ship departed. Talus approached her. Captain, was that wise? If the Council discovers what we are doing, The Council is wrong about the humans, Rena said, watching the defiant memory vanish into the darkness. I have dealt with dozens of species in my career. Humans are aggressive, yes, but they are also loyal to those who treat them fairly. The Council treated them as a threat to be contained. I think that was a catastrophic error in judgment. What makes you say that? Rena pulled up the data from their sensor scans of the human ship. Because that vessel should not exist. The drive signature indicates technology at least 20 years ahead of what humans supposedly possessed. If they hid that, what else did they hide? Talus stared at the data, his skin turning pale. They were always more advanced than they showed. Exactly. And now they have withdrawn behind a defensive perimeter with resources and technology we cannot measure. The Council thinks they won. I think they just made the worst mistake in galactic history. Rena set course for the Nalthine Collective, the first delivery point. As her ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, she considered the message she was carrying. She would never know what it contained. But she suspected it was the beginning of something much larger across the galaxy. Dozens of other merchant vessels were having similar conversations with human contacts. A network was forming in secret, connecting humanity with those species who had remained friendly or neutral. The Council had cut official ties, but unofficial channels were opening everywhere, and through those channels information began to flow. Information about Council military deployments, economic vulnerabilities, political divisions. The humans were not hiding behind their borders. They were watching, learning, and preparing. The silence continued, but it was not empty. It was filled with invisible threads being woven across the stars, connections that would matter greatly in the days to come. The Council Intelligence Directorate occupied a massive orbital station above the planet Centralis, homeworld of the Vryn Dominion. Inside a secure briefing room, Director Kelvin reviewed reports with growing concern. Kelvin was old, even by Vryn standards, with scales that had faded to pale gray. He had served in intelligence for 60 years and had seen countless crises. But nothing quite like this. "Show me again," he said to his assistant. A sharp-minded young operative named Jorah, the holographic display activated, showing a map of Council space. Small red markers appeared at seemingly random locations. "These are confirmed sightings of human vessels in the past 30 days, Jorah explained. "All in neutral or independent space. None in Council-controlled systems." Kelvin studied the pattern. "They are avoiding direct confrontation." "Yes, Director." "But look at the trajectories." Jorah adjusted the display. Lines appeared, connecting the red markers to various independent species and neutral trade stations. They are making contact with non-Council entities. We have reports from 17 different sources about humans offering trade deals, technology exchanges, and mutual assistance pacts. To species that were friendly to them before the Exodus, Kelvin observed. Correct. The Nalthine Collective has confirmed receiving human envoys. So have the Free Miners, the Talvik Assembly, and the Orthos Belt Confederacy. All species that voted against or abstained from Resolution 7749. Kelvin felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. He had argued against the resolution, warning that pushing humanity too hard would backfire. But he had been outvoted by hawks like Admiral Corvin, who saw humans as a threat to be contained. What are they offering? Advanced technology, mostly. Medical advancements, agricultural techniques, industrial processes. Things that are valuable but not overtly military. Yet, Kelvin added, technology is fungible. Medical equipment can be repurposed. Industrial processes can manufacture weapons. They are building alliances. Jorah nodded. Our analysts believe humanity is constructing an economic and political bloc outside Council influence. They are preparing for a long-term separation from us. Kelvin stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Or they are preparing for conflict and want allies when it comes. The thought had been bothering him for weeks. The human exodus had been too organized, too complete. Species did not evacuate their entire civilization on short notice unless they had been planning it for years. which meant the humans had anticipated the Council's actions long before Resolution 7749 was even proposed. "There is more, Director," Jorah said quietly. "We have intelligence suggesting the humans have made contact with the Krell." Kelvin turned sharply. "The Krell do not negotiate with anyone. The Krell were a mystery to most of the galaxy. An ancient, reclusive species that controlled a small but strategically important region of space near the galactic core. They had technology that predated the Council by millennia and an absolute policy of isolation. No one traded with the Krell, no one even communicated with them. They simply existed behind their borders and destroyed anyone who intruded." "Apparently they make exceptions," Jorah said, pulling up a decoded transmission fragment. "This was intercepted by one of our deep space monitoring posts. The encryption is human, but the destination signature matches Krell space." Kelvin read the fragment. It was incomplete, but certain phrases stood out. Mutual interest, ancient understanding, shared concerns about expansion. "If the humans have made contact with the Krell, this changes everything," Kelvin said slowly. "The Council has been trying to establish communication with them for centuries." "There are rumors, Director. Unconfirmed but persistent. Some of our sources claim that humans and KR L had secret contact decades ago, long before the resolution. That humanity may have been acting as an intermediary between the Krell and certain other species." Kelvin felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. Humans had always been extraordinarily good at diplomacy when they chose to be. They had natural empathy, an ability to find common ground even with very alien minds. What if they had been building relationships the Council knew nothing about? "We need to inform the full Council," Jorah said. "No," Kelvin replied immediately. "Not yet. If we present incomplete intelligence to the Council now, the Hawks will use it to justify military action. And if we go to war with humanity while they have unknown allies, we could be walking into a disaster. Then what do we do?" Kelvin thought for a long moment. "We gather more information, quietly. I want surveillance increased on all human contact points. I want our best analysts studying every piece of data we have on human activities over the past 50 years. And I want to know exactly what technology they possess. The last part may be difficult, Director. The humans were very careful about what they shared with us, which should have been our first warning," Kelvin said bitterly. "Species that share freely are confident in their relationships. Species that hoard their secrets are preparing for eventual conflict." Over the following weeks, Kelvin's team worked in secret, compiling a picture of humanity that disturbed him greatly. The humans had been far more advanced than they had revealed. Their civilian ships, which had seemed unremarkable, had actually been capable of speeds and maneuvers that should have been impossible. Their supposedly peaceful research stations had been positioned to monitor Council military movements. Their cultural exchanges had been intelligence-gathering operations. Even their entertainment, which many Council species had enjoyed, had been subtle propaganda. Human stories always emphasized themes of perseverance, individual courage, and resistance against overwhelming odds. They had been preparing their own people psychologically for exactly this kind of separation. "They knew," Kelvin told Jorah one evening as they reviewed the latest findings. "They knew for decades that the Council would eventually move against them, and they prepared accordingly. Should we have trusted them less?" Jorah asked. "No," Kelvin said. "We should have trusted them more. If we had made them true partners instead of junior members to be managed, none of this would have happened. The Hawks saw their military strength and growth as a threat. They failed to see that humans were offering us something valuable, an ally who actually wanted to work with us. But it was too late for such regrets. The damage was done. Humanity had withdrawn, and they were building something new outside Council control. The question was, what would happen when that construction was complete? Kelvin's answer came sooner than expected. A Council patrol fleet, led by Admiral Corvin himself, encountered a human convoy near the border of Council space. The humans were transporting goods to the Nalthine Collective, traveling through a neutral corridor that was technically legal, but provocative given the current tensions. Corvin ordered the convoy to stop for inspection. The humans refused, citing their rights under neutral space treaties. Corvin, who had been looking for an excuse to demonstrate Council authority, ordered warning shots fired across the convoy's path. The human response was immediate and shocking. Every civilian ship in the convoy suddenly displayed military-grade shields. Weapons ports opened on vessels that had been registered as cargo haulers. And from seemingly empty space, 3 human warships decloaked, their weapons locked onto the Council fleet. A transmission came through, calm and professional. Council vessels, you have fired on civilian ships in neutral space. This is an act of piracy under galactic law. Stand down immediately or we will respond with appropriate force. Corvin, furious at being outmaneuvered, ordered his fleet to attack positions. But before a shot could be fired, his tactical officer reported something impossible. Dozens of human ships were appearing on sensors, emerging from stealth systems that should not exist. The Council fleet was suddenly outnumbered 3-1, and then, from the flagship of the human fleet, another transmission arrived. Admiral Corvin, this is Commander Elizabeth Warren of the Human Defense Fleet. You are outmatched and outgunned. Withdraw now, or we will defend our convoy. You have 60 seconds to decide. Kelvin, monitoring the situation from his office light years away, watched the tactical display with his heart sinking. Corvin was being given a choice between humiliation and destruction. And knowing the Admiral's pride, Kelvin feared which option he would choose. The seconds ticked down, 50, 40, 30, at 15 seconds. Corvin gave the order to withdraw. The human fleet did not pursue. They simply escorted their convoy through the neutral corridor and disappeared beyond Council sensors. But the message had been sent and received. Humanity was not hiding. They were not weak. And they were not going to be intimidated. When news of the confrontation reached the Council, the reaction was explosive. Some demanded immediate military action. Others urged caution. But everyone now understood one critical fact. The humans had been holding back. Everything the Council thought it knew about human capabilities had been a carefully maintained deception. And now that the deception was dropped, the galaxy had to confront a terrifying question. If humans had hidden this much, what else were they capable of? The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the confrontation at the neutral corridor. The chamber was packed with representatives from every member species, and the mood was tense. Holographic displays showed footage of the incident from multiple angles. Captured by Council ship sensors and independent observers, Ambassador Telrock called the session to order, but his usual calm demeanor was strained. We are here to discuss the unprovoked display of military force by human vessels against a Council patrol fleet. Unprovoked? A voice called out from the observers' gallery. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Ambassador Hayes, the human representative who had walked out during the resolution 7,749 vote. She stood in the section reserved for non-Council observers, a place for species and entities who could watch but not officially participate. Telrock looked uncomfortable. Ambassador Hayes, you are welcome to observe, but you no longer have speaking privileges in this chamber. Then I will speak from here, Hayes replied calmly. And you will listen, because what I have to say concerns the survival of every species in this room. The chamber erupted in protest, but Hayes continued, her voice cutting through the noise. You call our defense of a civilian convoy unprovoked. Let us review what actually happened. A Council military fleet, led by Admiral Corvin, intercepted human civilian vessels in neutral space. These vessels were traveling through a recognized trade corridor, transporting legal goods to a friendly non-Council species. Admiral Corvin ordered them to stop and submit to search, violating their rights under neutral space treaties. When they refused, he fired on them. Warning shots, Corvin interrupted, standing from his seat. Designed to demonstrate authority, not cause harm. Firing on civilian vessels is an act of war under any interpretation of galactic law, Hayes shot back. You are fortunate that our escort fleet showed restraint. Under human military doctrine, we would have been justified in destroying your entire force. The chamber fell silent. The casual mention of destroying a council fleet, stated as simple fact rather than threat, sent chills through many present. Counselor Vashna activated her speaking light. Ambassador Hayes, humanity's withdrawal from council space was done without consultation or warning. You have since been making unauthorized contact with non-council species, building military alliances and displaying weapons technology that you never revealed during your time as council members. These actions suggest hostile intent. Hayes actually laughed, though there was no humor in the sound. Hostile intent? We offered you partnership for 300 years. We proposed mutual defense treaties that you rejected. We suggested economic cooperation that you ignored. We warned you repeatedly that restrictive policies like Resolution 7749 would damage our relationship. You proceeded anyway. And now you dare to accuse us of hostility? She walked down from the observer's gallery, ignoring protocol. Security personnel moved to intercept her, but Telrock waved them off. Hayes approached the central podium, her eyes scanning the assembled council members. You want to know what humanity is doing? I will tell you. We are building something new. A coalition of species who believe in genuine partnership rather than hierarchical control. Species who are too small or too independent to join your council but who share our values. And yes, we are arming ourselves because we have learned a valuable lesson. The galaxy respects strength, not good intentions. Admiral Corvin stood again. You speak of partnership, but you surround yourselves with military vessels. You cloak your ships in stealth technology. You position weapons in secret. These are not the actions of peaceful species. No, Hayes agreed. They are the actions of species who have been threatened. Tell me, Admiral, how many war games has the Council run in the past year that involved invasion scenarios of human space? Corvin's expression flickered. That information was classified. 17, Hayes answered her own question. We know because we have better intelligence networks than you realized. 17 different scenarios, all examining how to neutralize human military capability if we became a threat. You were planning to attack us long before Resolution 7749. The resolution was just the excuse you were waiting for. Director Kelvin, watching from his position in the intelligence section, closed his eyes. The secret war games had been his operation, ordered by the Council's Security Committee. But they had been contingency planning, not preparation for actual war. Or at least that was what he had told himself. Telrock tried to regain control of the session. Ambassador Hayes, even if your accusations have merit, they do not excuse humanity's current actions. You are destabilizing the Galactic Order. We are offering an alternative to the Galactic Order, Hayes corrected. Your council claims to represent all civilized species, but it is dominated by a handful of powerful empires who make decisions for everyone else. Smaller species have no real voice. Independent colonies are ignored. Non-council entities are treated as irrelevant. We are showing there is another way. And if we refuse to accept this alternative? Corvin demanded. Hayes met his gaze steadily. Then you will compete with it. Economically, politically, and if you force the issue, militarily? But understand this, Admiral. If the Council chooses to make this a military confrontation, you will lose. Not because we want war, but because we have prepared for it far more thoroughly than you can imagine. She pulled out a small device and activated it. The holographic displays throughout the chamber changed, showing images that made several council members gasp. Massive shipyards in deep space, churning out vessels at an impossible rate. Orbital fortresses surrounding human worlds, bristling with weapons. And most shocking of all, what appeared to be a gate structure. Something that looked like ancient Krell technology, but built on a scale that dwarfed anything in council space. This is what humanity has been building while you debated resolutions and ran war games. Hayes said quietly. We have not been idle. We have not been weak. We have been preparing for the day when we would need to stand on our own. That day has come. Counselor Vashna's crystalline form had turned almost black with shock. How? How did you build all of this without our intelligence services detecting it? Because you underestimated us, Hayes replied. You thought humans were aggressive but simple, technologically capable but not innovative, good at tactics but poor at strategy. Every one of those assumptions was wrong, and we encouraged you to believe them. While you watched our civilian settlements and counted our commercial ships, we were building something else entirely in places you never thought to look. Captain Dren of the Morva clans, who had warned the Council about human military patterns, spoke up. The gate structure? What is its purpose? Hayes smiled. That is humanity's gateway to the future. It will allow us to travel distances that would take your ships decades in a matter of hours. And it is not the only one. We have been building a network of these gates throughout human space and into territories beyond your reach. While you control your little corner of the galaxy, we are preparing to expand in directions you have not even considered. The implications crashed over the Council like a wave. If humans had faster-than-light capability that surpassed Council technology by that much, they could colonize regions of space that were currently unreachable. They could access resources, establish territories, and build power bases completely outside Council influence. Talrock looked like he had aged years in the past few minutes. What do you want from us, Ambassador? Nothing, Hayes said simply. We no longer need the Council's approval or permission. We are informing you of reality, not negotiating. Humanity and our allies will continue to expand and develop. If the Council wishes to maintain peaceful coexistence, we are willing. But if you attempt to interfere with our activities, restrict our growth, or threaten our security, we will respond with overwhelming force. The choice is yours. She turned and walked toward the exit. Before leaving, she paused and looked back. One more thing. The species who have allied with us, the ones you dismissed as too small or insignificant to matter, they number over 40 civilizations now. That is 40 species who chose partnership with humanity over membership in your council. Ask yourselves why. Ask why species would rather work with us than join you. The answer might be uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Then she was gone, leaving the council chamber in chaos. Arguments broke out immediately. Some demanded military action. Others urged diplomatic outreach. A few, like Director Kelvin, simply sat in stunned silence. Understanding that the galaxy had changed fundamentally and there was no going back, Admiral Corvin was furious, pounding his desk and calling for immediate mobilization of the council fleet. But several other military officers were shaking their heads, reviewing the images Hayes had shown. If even half of what she displayed was real, the council fleet was outnumbered and outgunned. In his office later that night, Kelvin met privately with Councillor Vashna. The crystalline being was pulsing with dark, troubled colors. We made a terrible mistake, she said quietly. Yes, Kelvin agreed. We treated them like children who needed guidance. We never realized they were already more advanced than us in ways we could not measure. What happens now? Kelvin looked out at the stars, seeing them differently than he had before. Now we live in a galaxy where humanity is a major power, allied with dozens of species we ignored. We either learn to coexist with them as equals, or we face a conflict that will devastate everyone involved. Can we win such a conflict? The Director of Intelligence, who had access to more classified information than almost anyone in the Council, gave his honest assessment. No, not if even a fraction of what Hayes showed us is real. And I believe it is all real. Humans do not bluff. Somewhere beyond Council space, in the vast territories that humanity now called home, 200 billion, people continued their work, building, expanding, preparing. The galaxy was larger than the Council had ever acknowledged. And humanity was claiming its place in that larger universe. The silence had ended. The message had been delivered. And nothing would ever be the same. 6 months passed since Ambassador Hayes's dramatic appearance at the council chamber. In that time, the galaxy had transformed in ways that most civilizations were still struggling to understand. The council had not declared war, but neither had they accepted humanity's new position. Instead, a cold standoff had settled across the stars, with both sides watching each other carefully while preparing for possibilities. No one wanted to speak aloud, Director Kelvin stood in an observation room aboard a Council intelligence vessel, watching a human gate structure through long-range sensors. The vessel was positioned just outside the boundary of what humanity had declared as their sovereign space, carefully avoiding any action that might be interpreted as hostile. But they were watching, always watching. "It is beautiful," Jorah said beside him, studying the massive ring of metal and energy that hung in space like a monument to ambition. Kelvin nodded. The gate was enormous, large enough for entire fleets to pass through simultaneously. And according to their best estimates, humanity had constructed at least 20 of these structures in various locations. The implications for trade, military deployment, and expansion were staggering. "We should have listened to them," Kelvin said quietly. "All those years ago, when they first proposed partnership treaties, we should have said yes. Would it have made a difference? Perhaps. Or perhaps this was always inevitable. Humans have a saying. They believe that those who are not growing are dying. Stagnation is death to them. The Council represents stability and order. Humanity represents change and expansion. Those philosophies were always going to clash eventually." A communication alert interrupted them. Kelvin accepted the call, and the image of Captain Rena appeared on the screen. The Dalthine merchant had become one of the primary intermediaries between Council space and human territories, growing wealthy in the process. "Director Kelvin, I have a message from human leadership. They are requesting a meeting. Unofficial, private, with no records." Kelvin felt his pulse quicken. "Where and when?" "Neutral station Gamma 7 in 3 days. They specify that you should come alone, with no military escort." It was a risk. Gamma 7 was deep in neutral territory, far from Council protection. But it was also an opportunity. "Tell them I will be there." 3 days later, Kelvin sat in a small conference room on the ancient station, waiting. Gamma 7 had been built centuries ago, by a long-extinct species, and was now maintained by independent operators who asked no questions and kept no records. It was the perfect place for meetings that officially never happened. The door opened and Ambassador Hayes entered, but she was not alone. With her came an older human male with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Hayes made introductions. "Director Kelvin, this is Secretary Thomas Rivera, Head of Human Foreign Affairs. He wanted to meet you personally." Rivera extended his hand, and this time Kelvin took it, mimicking the human greeting he had studied. The handshake was firm but not aggressive. "Thank you for coming, Director," Rivera said, sitting down. "I know this required courage on your part. If the Council learns you are meeting with us privately, it could damage your career." "My career is less important than preventing a war," Kelvin replied. Rivera smiled slightly. "Then we share the same goal?" "Let me be direct, Director. Humanity does not want conflict with the Council. But we will not return to being junior members of an organization that does not respect us. What we want is coexistence between equals." "The Council will never accept that," Kelvin said honestly. "Too many species see humanity as upstarts who have not earned such status." "Then the Council needs to adjust its perspective," Rivera said calmly. "Because that status is not something we are requesting permission for. It is a reality that already exists. The question is whether the Council acknowledges that reality peacefully or fights against it destructively." Kelvin leaned forward. "Help me understand something. Why did you hide your true capabilities for so long? If you had been honest about your technology and strength from the beginning, the Council might have treated you differently." Hayes answered this time. "Because honesty is vulnerability in galactic politics. If we had revealed our advancements, the Council would have moved to restrict us even earlier. We needed time to build our infrastructure, establish our alliances, and create a position strong enough that we could not be bullied or contained. Everything we did was defensive preparation." "Preparing for a fight you knew was coming," Kelvin observed. "Preparing for the possibility of a fight," Rivera corrected. "We hoped it would not be necessary. But hope is not a strategy. When Resolution 7749 passed, we knew our hopes had been misplaced. So we activated plans that had been decades in development. Kelvin studied both humans carefully. What happens now? Your gate network is operational. Your alliance with non-council species grows stronger every month. You are becoming a rival power center to the council itself. Eventually, that will lead to confrontation. Rivera pulled out a data tablet and slid it across the table. Or it leads to something else. We have a proposal. Not for council consideration, but for your personal review. A framework for galactic governance that includes both council space and human territories as equal, independent regions. Shared protocols for trade, navigation, and conflict resolution. Mutual non-aggression agreements. And most importantly, recognition that the galaxy is large enough for multiple political structures to coexist. Kelvin picked up the tablet and began reading. The proposal was comprehensive, well thought out, and surprisingly generous in some areas. It did not demand the dissolution of the council or major concessions. It simply established boundaries and protocols. For two separate political entities to function without constant friction, this would require the council to abandon any claim to authority over human space or our allied species. Kelvin noted. Yes, Rivera agreed. But in exchange, we would abandon any intention to expand into council-controlled territory. There are entire spiral arms of the galaxy that neither of us has explored. We can both grow without stepping on each other's territory. And if the council refuses? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Hayes spoke quietly. Then we continue on our current path. We expand anyway. We build our own trade networks, our own political structures, our own civilization completely separate from council influence. Eventually, we will surpass the council in economic and military strength. When that happens, the power dynamic shifts entirely. It would be better for everyone if we establish reasonable boundaries now, while we can still negotiate as relative equals. Kelvin understood the subtext. Humanity was offering this proposal while the council still had enough strength to be treated as a serious partner. Wait too long and the offer might change or disappear entirely. I cannot make this decision alone, Kelvin said. The council would need to vote, and that vote would be influenced by species who despise the very idea of treating humanity as equals. We know, Rivera said. That is why we are asking you personally to champion this proposal. You are respected in council intelligence circles. You have credibility that Ambassador Hayes and I lack. If you present this framework as a way to avoid conflict and maintain council dignity, there is a chance it could pass. And if it does not? Rivera stood and Hayes followed his lead. Then history will record that humanity tried for peace and was rejected. What comes after will not be our responsibility. The meeting ended shortly after. Kelvin remained in the conference room for a long time, reading through the proposal in detail. It was reasonable. More reasonable than he had expected. But reasonable proposals often died in political bodies where pride and tradition outweighed practical sense over the following weeks. Kelvin worked carefully, sharing the proposal with select council members who he believed might be open to it. The responses were mixed. Some, like Councillor Vashna, saw the wisdom in establishing clear boundaries before tensions escalated further. Others, like Admiral Corvin, viewed it as surrender and refused to consider it. The debate within the council grew heated. Public opinion across council space was divided. Some species saw the rise of humanity as a threat that needed to be contained at any cost. Others, particularly smaller member species, quietly wondered if the human model of coalition-based partnership might actually be preferable to the council's hierarchical structure. Then something happened that changed the calculation entirely. A distress signal reached council space from the far edge of the galaxy. A species called the Rithian Compact, not members of the council but known to them, reported that their territory was being invaded by an unknown force. Massive fleets of ships with technology that did not match any known civilization were systematically destroying Rithian colonies and infrastructure. The council debated whether to respond. But the Rithian territory was far from council space, and many members were reluctant to commit military resources to a non-member species. The debate dragged on for days while the Rithians sent increasingly desperate pleas for help. Then humanity acted. Without asking Council permission or even informing them beforehand, a human fleet appeared in Rithian space. The confrontation lasted less than a week. Human vessels, using their superior mobility and gate network, outmaneuvered the invaders and drove them back. The mysterious enemy fled and the Rithian compact was saved. The political earthquake that followed was immediate. The Rithians, grateful for the rescue, immediately signed a treaty with humanity. But more significantly, dozens of non-council species across the galaxy took note. Humanity had demonstrated that they were willing and able to project military force to protect their friends. Even at significant distance and cost, the Council had debated and delayed. Humanity had acted decisively. The contrast was not lost on anyone. In the emergency council session that followed, Kelvin stood to speak. He was old, tired, and increasingly certain that the institution he had served for decades was on the wrong path. Honored Council, we have reached a critical moment. Humanity has demonstrated both their military capability and their willingness to use it in defense of others. They have shown that they can act faster and more decisively than we can, and they have proven that species across the galaxy are willing to ally with them rather than rely on us. He activated a holographic display showing the growing list of human-allied species. The number had grown to 63 civilizations, many of which had previously been Council trading partners or potential member candidates. We face a choice. We can accept Director Rivera's proposal and establish a framework for peaceful coexistence. Or we can continue to insist on Council supremacy and face the inevitable conflict that will result. But we must understand that if we choose conflict, we will not win. The humans have prepared for this too thoroughly, and they have allies we cannot match. Admiral Corvin stood. You speak of surrender. I speak of survival, Kelvin shot back. The galaxy is changing. The old order where the Council controlled everything is ending. We can accept that change and adapt to it, or we can fight it and be swept away. I have spent 60 years in intelligence. I know how to assess threats and capabilities. And I'm telling you as clearly as I can that humanity is not a threat we can eliminate. They are a reality we must learn to live with. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than expected. The proposal passed by a narrow margin, with many abstentions and bitter opposition from military-focused species. But it passed. The treaty was signed 3 months later on the same neutral station where Kelvin had met with Rivera. Ambassador Hayes represented humanity, while Telrock signed for the Council. The document established formal boundaries, trade protocols, and conflict resolution mechanisms. Most importantly, it recognized both the Galactic Council and the Human Coalition as independent, equal political entities. Not everyone was happy. Admiral Corvin resigned in protest. Several species threatened to leave the Council over the decision. But the treaty held, and slowly, the galaxy began to adjust to its new reality. Kelvin retired shortly after, his career ending on a note that some called treasonous and others called visionary. He returned to his homeworld and spent his remaining years writing his memoirs, trying to explain to future generations how the galaxy had changed. In his final chapter, he wrote, "Humanity taught us a lesson we should have known already. Power is not granted by institutions or traditions. It is earned through capability, determination, and the willingness to act when action is necessary." The Council believed it could manage humanity, contain them, keep them in a subordinate role. We were wrong. And that wrongness cost us the dominant position we had held for millennia. But perhaps that is not a tragedy. Perhaps the galaxy is better served by multiple power centers, multiple philosophies, multiple approaches to civilization. Time will tell. Across human space, the construction continued. New colonies were established in distant regions. The gate network expanded, connecting worlds that had never imagined such contact. And the alliance of species grew, bound together not by hierarchical authority, but by mutual respect and shared interests. Ambassador Hayes, now elderly herself, stood on the observation deck of humanity's flagship and looked out at the stars. Beside her, a young human officer asked, "Do you think the peace will last?" Hayes considered the question carefully. Peace is not a destination. It is a continuous effort. The treaty we signed creates a framework, but frameworks require constant maintenance. There will be disputes, misunderstandings, and tensions. But as long as both sides prefer negotiation to conflict, the peace will hold. And if someone breaks it, then we respond appropriately. But from a position of strength, not weakness. That was the lesson we taught the Council. That was why we left in the first place. We refused to be victims or supplicants. We insisted on respect, and we were willing to fight for it if necessary. That willingness, more than our weapons or our technology, is what guarantees our security. The young officer nodded, absorbing the wisdom. Out in the darkness, human ships continued their work. Exploring, building, connecting, creating something new in the ancient galaxy, humanity had departed without farewell or warning. They had built a new civilization in the silence, and in doing so they had changed the galaxy forever. Not through conquest or dominance, but through the simple insistence that they be treated as equals. The conflict had reached across the stars, not with weapons and destruction, but with ideas and determination. And in the end, those proved more powerful than any fleet or empire. The galaxy would never be the same. And perhaps, as Director Kelvin had suggested, that was exactly as it should be. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.